Hi, this is Miss Litton, and this is lunchtime on a 4-day weekend almost. Say hi. Hi. These are excellent AP biologists eating their lunch. And we are going to review the respiratory system, but we're not going to get caught up in it too tightly. Why? It's not one of the main systems. What are the systems we need to know for sure? That looks delicious and healthy. What are the ones we have to know for sure? Nervous, endocrine, and immune. Perfect. Okay, but we can look at this relating to homeostasis. Okay, so we have to be able to acquire gases in order to do what process? I don't know what I'm doing here. I didn't mean to do that.
Cellular respiration.
Cellular respiration, right? Okay, so step one, you've got to get the gases in you, got to breathe. You want to differentiate between internal and external respiration. External respiration is the exchange of gases between what and what? Yes, the environment and the alveoli of your lungs. That's exactly what I was going to say. Good job. And then you have circulation, and then internal respiration is the exchange where? Yeah, capillaries and your cells of your body, or the interstitial fluid technically around the cells of your body. And then cellular respiration occurs within the mighty mitochondria. Yes? And you already compared and contrast the differences between land animals and water animals. Who has it easier as far as breathing goes? Land. But what's the problem with land animals? What's their issue? Yes, they have air moves. It's easier to move it. There's more of it. What is it? Losing moisture. Because they need to keep their respiratory surface, which is large, moist. What else? Thin. And if you're multicellular, probably near some transport system, right? They need to keep their respiratory surface moist, and on land it can dry out. You can lose a lot of water just through the process of breathing. Animals in water don't have to worry about that, but it's harder to get the oxygen. Keep in mind, the oxygen is dissolved into the water. It's not like I just want to make sure we all know we're not splitting water molecules and getting the oxygen from the water molecule itself, right? We all know that. Just like you would dissolve sugar into coffee, the oxygen is dissolved into the water. Okay? So then categories, or not categories, what do I want to say? Characteristics of a respiratory surface: thin to allow for diffusion, moist to allow the gases to dissolve, large enough, adequate size in order to get enough gases to maintain your body, and usually it's near a transport system if you have it localized in one area. And there's a lot of different varieties of respiratory surfaces, but they all have some sort of exchange across a cell, what? Membrane. Yeah, it's always across the cell membrane. Obviously, if you're thin, it can be across your skin or using your gastrovascular cavity. Your respiratory surface can be extending out, like in gills. The fish we spent a little bit of time on, and the reason we did that is because of what do you see? And we've seen this process other places as well. Countercurrent, yeah. It's where the air or the water that's carrying the gases is moving parallel but in opposite direction as to the blood flow. And that allows, it always facilitates, the gradient is always towards the blood getting more and more oxygenated. Okay? And you can see that here in this diagram as well. We then talked about variations, like what you see in the arthropods, that they don't need, even though they're multicellular, they don't need a circulatory system because they have a tracheal system. They have highly branched tubes running through their body, and they're delivering oxygen directly to every cell. Okay, then, and that part you all did in the ed puzzle that I made for you. The flow of air through your body, just make sure we get it. It starts at the nostrils, and the reason why it's going to start at your nostrils is because it's warm, it's moist, and it can filter. Okay, that's why your nostrils are good. Could you breathe through your mouth? Yes, but you're not going to have that same filtering process you have when you breathe air through your nose. Okay, then your larynx is the back of your throat. Your larynx is shared by what other system? Oh, I didn't mean to say that. Your pharynx is at the back of your throat. Your pharynx is shared by what system? Digestive, yeah. So then you run the risk of having food go down your respiratory pathway. How is that avoided? How does your respiratory pathway protect itself from food? Your epiglottis. Yeah, when you swallow, your epiglottis is a flap that covers the top of your trachea so that food will not go down it. Then you have your larynx, which is your what? What is your larynx? Voice box. Then you have your trachea. It's a tube that is open perpetually, always. It's always open. Whereas your esophagus is not. Your esophagus has muscles. And what kind of muscles would you have on your esophagus? Your esophagus. Smooth. And you have circular muscles and longitudinal muscles that do what's called peristalsis to move the food through. But your respiratory system is always open, and it's held open by C-shaped cartilaginous rings, and those run along the front. Take your finger and run along your trachea. I'm going to tilt your head back a little bit, and you can feel those C-shaped cartilaginous rings, and that's to keep it open so air can always pass. Right behind your trachea is your esophagus. And it's C-shaped. Why is it C-shaped? Why doesn't it go all the way around like the endodermis would around, the Casparian strips would go around the endodermis? Why does it only have to be C-shaped? Esophagus behind it, yeah. And if you're to the point where you're at the esophagus or coming in from the back through your spinal cord, you've got bigger issues than your trachea. Okay, and then your trachea branch into your bronchi. And your bronchi branch into your bronchial tubes, and the smallest tubes of all are called bronchioles, and those will dead end into a sac of alveoli. Here, yes?
Wait, why do you have like these apple bottoms here for like what do you guys have?
Apple bottoms?
Yeah.
I am assuming that is because you're male and you're larger and have larger lung capacity and you play a different role sexually than females, and you might be the one that does the protecting, that you have a larger covering in that area to protect your trachea. Okay. All right. Yeah, there's nose. You can see pharynx. Your voice, your vocal cords at the top of your larynx. Here you can see the trachea and the C-shaped cartilaginous rings. You have cilia all lining your trachea, and they are constantly beating. And by the way, the second you start smoking a cigarette, and 20 minutes after you stop smoking your cigarettes, your cilia become paralyzed. So it's not only the carcinogens from the cigarette that are going down into your lungs, but anything out in the environment that might be bad for you are going out into your lungs. And then they start picking up and working again about 20 minutes after you stop smoking that cigarette. So not good. Bronchial tree, and then you can see the lobules right here. You can have lobules as just like the differentiated part of it. You can have lobules of your liver. So that's a word that's kind of used universally, like septum is a divider. And you can see the alveoli, and this increases the surface area in order to make sure you have enough for gas exchange. Let's ask these questions. Today, I'm in. Why are you making me do this now? Just a moment. I pause you. Sorry about that. I skipped a couple things there. We just said that tidal volume is what? Normal breath, and vital capacity is your maximum. And then we said what was unique about birds? Unidirectional airflow through their lungs, the parabronchi of their lungs. And that's because when they bring air in, they actually put it somewhere and kind of store it in their posterior air sacs, and then they allow it to flow through their lungs, their anterior air sacs, and then it goes out. So it's not like us where it's like in and we don't have any other place to go. So it's in and it's out. So we're wasting that. But they're going through their respiratory tract, and then they're able to get even more oxygen out of the air. And they do what? I can't hear you. Countercurrent. The air with the blood. You're being very shy, but that's okay. Countercurrent. All right. Now, let's talk about exchange of gases. We know number one is the partial pressure of gases. Doesn't matter if we're out at the tissues or out at the lungs. Gases are going to go from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. That's step one. That's universal. Okay? When carbon dioxide and oxygen travel differently through our blood. Oxygen travels attached to what? Hemoglobin. CO2 travels attached to what? Water. And it becomes carbonic acid and then bicarbonate. Okay? So it's traveling out in the plasma, and oxygen is traveling in the red blood cell itself. So oxygen is just going to go from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. Okay? And we know and it forms oxyhemoglobin. This bicarbonate can now join with this hydrogen that was on the oxygen. You could think of it like that, just to have a balanced equation. And now we have H what? 2CO3. Okay? And that is carbonic acid. And then carbonic acid will break down into what? CO2 and water. And this actually takes place in the red blood cell. Okay? And then the CO2 will be exhaled. That's what happens at the lungs. So you're doing partial pressure, and then you're doing that exchange. Anytime you're forming this little middle product here, you're using one enzyme, carbonic anhydrase. And just, you're either going from this direction to this direction or this direction over. You're using the same enzyme each time. Now, when you go out to the tissues, okay, now the oxygen is greatest inside the red blood cell and lowest at the tissue fluid. But what helps hemoglobin to release the oxygen to change its behavior, because you think about it, it hangs on to the oxygen and clings to it at the tissues, but then you've got to get it to let go now. And so what changes its behavior? So hemoglobin, besides just talking about concentration, how do you get it to let go? What happens? Change in what? pH. And the reason is CO2 is going from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. It's hooking up with water and forming what? H2CO3, right? Carbonic acid, and then breaking down into H and bicarbonate. This H, the lowering of the pH, makes hemoglobin have a less of an affinity for oxygen, and now the oxygen can diffuse into the tissues. Okay, same steps, just different direction, right? Okay, and that allows you to let go of those gases. And then we know more about that too. We know there's some other things that will facilitate, besides the change in pH, letting go of oxygen. What's another thing that encourages hemoglobin to let go of oxygen? Temperature. What? Cold or hot? Yeah, warmer temperatures, that dissociation curve moves to the right. It lets go of that oxygen and it makes it available. So pH, temperature, and pressure of the gases, partial pressures of the gases. Right? And so we looked at these saturation curves here, percent of oxyhemoglobin. So you could pick any one point and take it all the way up, and we have the same percent of oxygen, partial pressure of oxygen here, right? So here it's at 45% or 50% here, amount of oxygen. But when I look here at this warmer temperature, you only have 40-something% saturation. You go up here to normal, it's still hanging on to it, and colder, it's still hanging on to it. So this makes it so that we're not having to waste and make oxygen available if it's not really needed. Because every time, we use something or facilitate a reaction, right, every time it changes hands, you're going to lose a little bit of energy every single reaction you make, right? So this is a way to regulate and release the oxygen when it's needed. Okay, and then the last part, just talked about like different diseases you can get, and they're not going to test you on the diseases. I just thought you might find them interesting. Yeah, so here your tonsils are infected, laryngitis, sinusitis, some more sinusitis. Even though you're talking about the respiratory tract, you can have an earache because that's part of, connected because you have a eustachian tube, it can get blocked. And then these are all bad things that can happen to your lungs. Okay, you're awesome. Good job. I wish those questions worked. I don't know what's up with that. I can try one more time and see, but I have a feeling it's still going to be annoying. Okay, what's wrong with me? Here we go.
Hey.
No. Okay, I'm gonna sign in. Sure, I'll sign in. Let's go. Okay. No, I'll sign in with Winnie Linton. Find that host. Find that host. You can do it. Where's the host? We're gonna pause you because we don't know what's going on. But have a piece of toast. It's always yummy. Maybe a little cinnamon and sugar.